Good evening. Welcome to today's Tropics for August 11th, 2021. Please note, I'm not a meteorologist, and this video is just a collection of my thoughts and opinions about the storms I'm talking about, and for any decision making, please consult the National Hurricane Center or your local officials. So today I'm looking at Tropical Depression Fred, which is currently in the Northern Caribbean, and Invest 95L, which is currently in the Central Atlantic. So let's look back at Fred here. Per the 8 p.m. in a NHC position, it was actually up here near the border of the Dominican Republic and Haiti. However, you can see all the convection here, deep convection that is all of the southeast of it, and that's due to the kind of flow you would expect on the southeast side of the lobe, especially with a smaller, weaker one here. You got this southerly flow and you get some frictional convergence and you get some kind of upslope flow, and that allows for some convection to get going. So the storm's weaker now, and now it's uncertainty of what sort of land it interacts with now and how strong is it getting off of the island here, and uh, you know, like, what kind of environment it is, because we could have something that's very weak coming into this area, or maybe a little stronger, but definitely seems that after raking itself over the Hispaniola's mountains today, it doesn't seem that Fred will be all that strong. Taking a look at the water vapor imagery here, you can see some features that will be important for the evolution of the storm in the next few days. Here's one upper level low here. This isn't really super relevant feature. It's more so this upper trough or upper low to the east or to the west of the storm here, and that will be influencing some of the flow in the next few days. So far, Fred isn't really in too bad of a spot. There's an upper level anticyclone here that is keeping the shear relatively low for the moment. But you can see there's some westerly flow even as far south as here. And remember, the low position is a bit further northwest than all that convection, so it's starting to get near where the upper level troughs or lows are starting to get or have some influence, so it might start getting sheared soon. That's another kind of roadblock that's going to keep it from getting too strong. Looking at the GFS in the next couple of days, so this is on Friday afternoon, and you can see the GFS here keeps it weak at this point because it kind of keeps it over Cuba here, and so it's not able to really strengthen because it's not over water. And you can see this upper trough, so that's the one to the west here, and it's trying to become more north-south oriented here, or the elongation part of it. And you can see it's bringing some southwesterly flow right near Fred here, and the upper anticyclone is kind of restricted away from these areas, so it's not really able to uh, keep the more favorable upper level flow here. So even if it is getting over water, it's probably going to have a hard time just because it's going to get sheared as well. So it seems in the next couple of days, Fred should be weak. But what the GFS here does is it actually kind of takes it off of Cuba as it starts feeling more of that weakness in the region. It starts building out to the east. So it turns north and kind of goes up part of Florida. And this is because it's able to keep a bit of a low-level center here. And what it does with that is it feels a more favorable shear environment. It's basically what this upper level low here does is it orients itself more favorably with regard to Fred, and so the uh, so it kind of makes a kind of upper level outflow channel, and that allows for some more convection and upper level divergence here, which allows for Fred to strengthen a little. At the same time, it also weakens this upper low here and strengthens this upper anticyclone, kind of makes it have more influence at this point. So we'll see if that happens, but there's possibility in the next few days as it gets into the Florida Straits, we might see an attempt at some reorganization if it's actually, uh, you know, enough of an entity to do so as or, during the weekend. The track is important here too. The GFS kind of keeps it off a bit to the west and keeps it over the Gulf of Mexico, so that would allow for some more time over water. We also have some models such as the Euro model, which kind of puts it over Florida earlier, so it doesn't really have much of a window to strengthen. But even then, GFS is one of the more unfavorable models for the shear here. But what this does is kind of keeps a lot of these upper troughs in the flow at this point, and so the upper levels anticyclone here can't really extend to north or extend north. So as Fred goes north, it starts getting sheared again. So it only really has a quick window of strengthening, and then it starts to have some issues again. So it doesn't seem that it will have a very good environment, and it seems that chances are going down for it to be uh, very strong. At least it seems that at this point it'll remain on the weak side just because the conditions really aren't there, and it's also going over a lot of land. So here is the official NHC forecast for Fred, and kind of keeps it skirting along Cuba, but it doesn't really strengthen it because there's a lot of uncertainty. It strengthens it a little bit as it gets into the Gulf, and yeah, it does kind of side with the bit side a bit more west right now uh, into the Gulf. So this would allow for it to strengthen a little here. So we'll see what happens because the we'll be ironing out a lot of the uncertainty during the week into the late week as it starts kind of lifting out of the Greater Antilles because with all this mountain interaction and what could happen to the global center, we just really don't know. And even the small track errors could mean a big difference in what uh, eventually happens. At the same time, there's some tropical storm watches and warnings. At this point, we might not need them because it's a tropical depression. However, no matter what happens to the winds, even if they strengthen further up here, again, there is some deep convection here. And what this is going to do is cause heavy rain over those areas that do have the convection. So that it could cause heavy rains and mudslides, generally dangerous conditions. So we'll see what happens there. We might see the same sort of thing happen over Cuba, and possibly eventually heavy rain over Florida. But again, we need a bit more time to see what ends up actually happening with that. So let's take a look at Invest 95L right now. So it's a nice northeast southwest oriented trough here. Kind of see the low level flow here, and then here's that trough. Currently, it's pretty obvious that there's some easterly shear. It's kind of normal for the central Atlantic, especially in those situations where you have a lot of easterly flow across the whole basin at the upper levels. You'll tend to have the parts near Africa have a bit more easterly shear, and that's what's happening. So you have all the deep convection way off to the west here. So so far it doesn't look too good, but shear should be starting to lessen the next couple days. And probably later this week is when we might see this try to get going. We'll see if it does that. The one thing that we'll see if it happens, it'll probably start to orient itself a bit more north to south in the next couple days. This is early Saturday morning on the GFS. The GFS doesn't do a whole lot with it. I'm not sure if I'm all that confident in that solution verifying because the GFS has kind of been playing catch up with the storm. It's been too persistently too weak with it, and it just hasn't really been able to give it convection. Has it having a few bursts, but has it kind of convectively anemic for a few days, and it's been a lot weaker than in reality. You can see it has some uh, deep convection here. Well, the GFS doesn't really have a whole lot of that, so we might see it strengthen or trend stronger in the next few days. But anyway, this is probably when we'll see it try to develop, if it hasn't already. As it kind of orients itself here, you look for it to try to spin up where it has the most vorticity, and that's usually on the northern side. So we'll see if that happens. the environment is also pretty favorable because you can see in the deep layer there's just all easterly flow, so you're not having a lot of that westerly shear you can sometimes have. See, yeah, very low shear, so nothing too much to worry about. Pretty good relative humidity, pretty moist air for this part of the basin. Uh, if you kind of look at a spatial view of it, you can see some dry air kind of behind it, a little trying to wrap in here. But there's a large area of moisture air, so the synoptic conditions actually look pretty decent for it. The only thing that isn't very good for it is the flow. It looks like 15 to 20 knots. It's a little on the fast side, and that might kind of keep it from closing off a low. But conditions look relatively favorable, so not too sure why at this point why the models are so bearish at this point. The steering is relatively straightforward at this point. It looks like it'll be under um, this subtropical ridge as is usual, and kind of just travel a bit more west-northwest. And if you kind of trace along where I'm tracing here, you can see that what the models have generally done with it is put it over a lot of the Greater Antilles, which Fred is over right now. So we might see impacts there again if that comes to pass, and that might make for some uncertainties once it gets there. Another kind of thing to notice is here in the flow, it's mostly easterly, maybe east southeasterly, but if you have it really try to ramp up by this point, I don't think it will ramp up a whole lot until it's closer to the islands. But if something really weird happens, there is actually slightly more southeasterly flow towards further levels further up. So along with what you'd expect with the beta drift, um, you'd expect a storm that's stronger to go a bit more north and perhaps miss the islands or something, and a weaker storm to go a bit more south. We'll have to watch the trends too, and see if there's an area where a little center tries to get going, because that'll give us a good idea of where the track will be. Uh, so it might not be a very uh, or it might be a decent confidence track, but it's very important in terms of the eventual strength, because there's definitely a big difference between where it tracks. If it goes further north, you're going to have this upper anticyclone from Fred, kind of keeping a lot of upper level troughing here, and that will shear 95L unless it becomes strong before it gets here and kind of pushes them out of the way. But it doesn't look like it'll be super strong at this point, so we'll see if it does that. But generally, the environment north of the Greater Antilles doesn't look too favorable. That also depends on Fred. If it's weaker, then you'll have a less amplified upper anticyclone, maybe a bit more of a favorable environment up here, but it doesn't look like this is the greatest environment. Of course, if it goes over the Greater Antilles, it's going to be dealing with a lot of mountains, and that's just generally not favorable, even if the other conditions are favorable. Now, if it can kind of duck down south of a lot of the model agreement, a lot of it has it going over islands, but if it somehow ducks south of them and gets in the Caribbean, the upper level flow actually looks pretty favorable here. You can see a lot of upper easterlies, so the upper troughing is kind of totally lifted out of the Caribbean, and at the same time, there's weaker trade winds than normal, and you can see they become weaker as you get further west, and so that means less of that trade wind divergence that you tend to see at this time of year in the Caribbean. So if we can see, if it kind of again ducks down south, it doesn't look like it will, but if it can, it might encounter a surprisingly decent environment in the Caribbean. So far, it's too early to say, and again, the models don't do a whole lot with it. Perhaps they see something we don't, and conditions really aren't that favorable. But we're getting into mid-August. It's almost peak season, so it's a good time to start watching almost every wave that comes off Africa, just because it is that time of year. Otherwise, there's a whole lot going on in the Atlantic, other than 95L and Fred. If you have any questions or comments about my videos or video, please let me know, and thanks for watching.